Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us at Tile of Spain for what's hopefully the last webinar of the year for you guys to get the end of your continuing ed credits locked up for 2022 as we move into 2023. My name is Ryan Fazan. I've been the technical consultant for Tile of Spain for, I guess about 14 years now. And one of the things that I'm always asked to do is trends, either reporting on what's happening for the year, or in this case, forecasting what's coming up for 2023. And it's one of my favorite things to do. And I'm giving you a little bit more of a snapshot into my process this year than ever before, because this one I'm calling Serving Generational Solutions. And I thought that this year especially, doing something a little bit different was incredibly important. Now, something I've had to realize is that even though I don't really have a YouTube channel or use social media at all, what I am is a content creator, and it's something that I've realized, and that one of the most important things for a content creator is to understand the power of their platform and their responsibility to create content that actually makes the world a better place. And so I take that responsibility very seriously. And that's what this session is all about, is I hope giving a message that our industry is uniquely suited to deliver, and at a time when the world really needs to hear it. So that's why it's called Creating Solutions for Generations. And as I said at the beginning, you know, if anyone's seen any of my other trend talks, I talk about why I love doing this kind of presentation, because the research is so in depth. I look at every single touch point that we have in our lives, other than design and architecture, before I actually look at what's happening in design and architecture and how that builds into the products that we're developing in the tile industry. And normally I give sort of more along the right side. I give a little snapshot of the funnel, and then give more of the finite ideas of how the tile industry is assimilating all of those ideas into the current trends. This year, and for this presentation, I thought it was important and very, very relevant to give a lot more of the touch points that are building our trends, because there's kind of a universal trend that has been emerging over the past few years that's influencing just about everything. And what started to really coalesce for me was one word that I kept seeing across multiple different industries, and that keyword was regenerative. I started seeing that being used as a prefix, not a suffix. It wasn't an add-on. It started to become a prime directive for multiple different touch points that we have in our life. If you look at tourism, agriculture, tech, and even entertainment, we're seeing this theme of regenerative or benevolent driven design go into all of these different fields. And it's this shift that we have or that we're starting to see in product development, which is a world that I worked in, driving product development for over a decade. And up until now, it seemed that the kind of current common sort of direction was, okay, let's come up with an idea and then figure out how to develop that idea and bring it to market and put all of our kind of production stream ideas and look at all the costs and balances. And then we'd hand it off to a marketing team that would go through all of the different studies and find different certifications and markers to put on that product to figure out the sustainable spin as a marketing initiative. And that's really, we're seeing across multiple different industries, not good enough for the consumer base anymore, and something that is much more benevolent driven or regenerative for both society and the world is something that's much more important to all of us today. So as I was building this presentation, I started to think very critically, and you'll notice as I'm going through, I'm using language in a very specific way, to not use loaded terms that that have connotations for people as much as possible, and then to use very strong language when it's appropriate. Now, the reason those two phrases are up there at the crossroads is I think we're at a crossroads in terms of design, and seeing this this keyword of regenerative process go into so many different industries. I think what we're seeing is this crossroads between our previous sort of mindset of profit first, or another way to put that is exploitative design, into a much more benevolent driven design. So using language that better emphasize the key truths around our decisions is really, really important. We're thinking about language, and we're about to get to why language is so important. But first, to answer that question, we have to ask, well, why is this coming from the tile industry? And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I think that tile is uniquely suited because of the way it embodies all of the principles that we're looking for today. And there's a responsibility in the tile industry because of that embodiment to start pushing this benevolence-driven design to the fore, because tile really has been preserving millennia of human history. And we know that because we can go to museums around the world and see examples of some of the earliest tile, from tombs of kings of ancient Egypt to past civilizations like the Assyrian Empire in the Ishtar Gate. And we can go to museums, ironically not in their home countries, but we can go to museums and see examples of ceramic. And in fact, what we know about past civilizations is really only there because of recovered articles of ceramic tile, pottery, and other things that we've created in ceramics. And where we're at today in our industry is technology has progressed to a point that we can even recreate 4,000-year-old looking glazes from the tombs of ancient Egyptian kings or the Assyrian Ishtar Gate. And that sort of level of progression in an industry, and something that we've literally lived with for all of our modern civilization means that ceramics are uniquely suited to be able to dictate direction for architectural design in terms of inspiration and having the history and authority to be able to talk about these kind of things. So one of the things that I really wanted to illustrate is the sort of concept of biomimicry. And it's something that's come up in a bunch of my environmental presentations. But it's interesting to note that over 4,000 years of history, ceramics and their basic ingredients really haven't changed. From it's simply clay mixed with feldspar that's found in about 90% of the rocks on this earth. mixed with different minerals, silicates to contain the expansion and contraction of that matrix, and then oxides to pigment it. And then heat is added to basically create a man-made stone exactly the same way the Earth's crust creates stone over millions of years. So if you think about the way stones are made, it's exactly what we do in production. Particulates are loaded and broken down into small components. The layers and layers of sediment build up and create the pressure that we recreate in our presses. Mixed with natural minerals within the Earth's crust, it's exposed to heat from the mantle and sintered into a natural stone. And that's exactly what we do today. And it's what we did 4,000 years ago when making ceramic tile. What ceramics offer is a generational solution. It offers us the ability to create buildings that are so inspiring and durable that generations of people can travel around the world to go see them. Like Casa Bayo in Barcelona, that's over 100 years old today. And it's something that we still do here at Tile of Spain is bring groups to see these historic buildings that literally are only as healthy as they are, still standing and able to be refurbished and restored the way they are because of how much ceramic material is in them. And what this philosophy of this product is creating generational value and benevolent impact. The reason it feels right for this industry to be the one that steps up and starts shifting the thought away from, and we'll get into it, sustainable design being a subcategory towards benevolent design being the prime directive is because of the concept of extreme ownership. And I'd be remiss if I didn't name where this phrase came from. It's actually, it's the name of a book and a podcast by Jocko Willink that was introduced to me by a really good friend in the industry here, actually. He was in my last year's presentation, and I actually still have a headshot of him that's saved in my phone in favorites, that every time I'm trying to say something is good enough, I force myself to look at that and look into his eyes and say, yeah, this is good enough, because the concept of extreme ownership and transparency without qualifications is what the world is really looking for right now. And I think that ceramics are uniquely suited to lead by example, because it's a product that's inert during creation, useful life, and at the end of its life. It's 100% natural, both in inputs and outputs. And it inherently promotes the health of occupants by being non-bioavailable and zero VOCs, and provides generational solutions rather than something just for that client that's sitting in front of you, because it withstands disaster and has the ability to be spot repaired. There's something that I've brought up a couple of times, but one of our groups that we took to Spain, actually, we stood on the balcony that Columbus knelt on to receive the commission to explore and find new world in 1492. That balcony was completely covered in ceramic, and there were areas that had been spot repaired, but there were still tiles there, and it was able to be refurbished because it was done in ceramic tile. Now, in terms of extreme ownership, we also have to, we talked about all the good, we also have to address the challenges. And one of the major challenges in this industry is the high embodied carbon. Because we fire using natural gas and so far have not found a way around that, there is a high embodied carbon, but that's mitigated by the extreme lifespan of the product. It's something that we look at, both operational and embodied carbon in our choices today. And the strength of our industry is such that Spain and many other countries around the world have followed suit, commissioning entire sector-wide life cycle analysis studies, and all of this data can be found on multiple websites, both Aster, the Manufacturers Association in Spain, the Tile of Spain website, and then the American website, Why-Tile, put forth by the TCNA, I believe, is all have links to this global EPD and all of the data that was driven to create this Type 3 environmental product declaration. As well as the Ceramic Union of Tile of Manufacturers across the European Union have come together and created the roadmap to 2050 and ways that are attainable for them to both reduce their emissions and their carbon footprint with different ways that they plan on getting there and reporting back to the European Union throughout the years leading up to 2050. All of this is in service to the point that right now, trust is becoming the most valuable commodity that we, all of us, are finding value in today. For the past decade or so, with productivity being sort of the holy grail that was held up for a lot of people, that we always said that time was a more valuable commodity than money. But the truth is today, as we move into 2020s and beyond, trust is really becoming the most valuable commodity. Because if there's a face for the 21st century, it's this one. More and more, we see sort of widespread skepticism because it's really hard to know what to believe with different AI generated content and things like that. We're having a hard time sifting through and finding truth. And that's why extreme ownership and almost radical transparency is extremely important when you're trying to force a shift in consciousness. And it was funny how many websites and times I came across the information of the difference between misinformation and disinformation. And that just sort of really highlighted for me how serious the trust issue is for most people today. I found all of these stats really interesting as well, that it used to be that we would look for personal testimonials and turn to social media to find a lot of that in order to find out what to really trust. But we're seeing internet usage and social media usage going down even to pre-pandemic levels, even though there was a spike as we were all locked inside. So I think that having the right sort of perspective to come from and being able to stand up with integrity to back up a message is really, really important to people today. So it's funny, we're in an architectural and design podcast, or sorry, webinar right now, and framing normally is structural, but in this case, I'm talking about language, even though yesterday I was hanging doors and framing really did matter. But today we're talking language. The way we speak about things has tremendous power. What the context that we apply it in, and most importantly, whether it's an adjective, whether it's a descriptive word, or an additional sort of add-on, or whether it is the thing that we're talking about, and also whether it's something that's in the future or something that is present. And what I really wanted to say was that right now we're seeing, with all of the rise in regenerative and changing in languages, I think sustainable is a less impactful word than benevolent, which I've used a few times right now, because benevolence really kind of shifts the perspective, and it really can't be a secondary or worse elective, which is how it's been added to a lot of things. Subcategory, it needs to be kind of a prime directive, thinking first about whether something that we create can be a net positive, or first about whether it should be created than whether it can be, is extremely important. And something that a lot of conversations have been coming up over the past few years is that, ironically, what we're getting to is a sort of concept of harmony with the land, which is what was disregarded in a lot of indigenous cultures. And I put this sort of bottom point in because I found it really interesting, and it leads right into the next slide. That if plastics were around in the time of Columbus and they were carrying any on those boats, it would only just now have perhaps started to decompose. Now you'll notice, looking at this one, that nothing here is a building material, but it does give us a lot of information in terms of how things actually break down. And the relevancy of this is illustrated by what looks like an iceberg, but is actually exactly like an iceberg, much deeper down below the surface, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And so waste and the timeline of things before they become waste becomes incredibly important. And it's really important for this industry because a large percentage, it varies. It's really hard to find research, science-based research and data on waste streams that funnel into our landfills. But it is agreed in most of the studies that I've found. Sadly, not many of them are recent. The most recent I could find was 2015. That stated around 40% of the waste going into landfills was from the construction industry. But as we look down how long it takes, some of these things, the length of time span for things to break down really surprised me. And the fact that there are no organisms that can be used in respirometry testing to actually create any degradation in styrofoam cups or plastic bags, of which the predominant ingredient is PVC. It became really, really interesting. This was a study published by the EPA in 2016. And what that kind of leads to in us in the construction industry is that there's a real shift in demographics that's happening. If we look at it's 61% of the home buyer market right now that is aged between 26 and 57. And the priorities of this demographic are quite different, as well as the time frames that they're looking to hold their properties are. And so when it comes to the entry-level stage, which is the 37% of the market, the products that we're building and how we're building those buildings becomes incredibly important, because it's a huge buying group, as well as the people that are looking for more generational investments and long-term property investments, adding to the rest of that 61%. So the kind of products that we're putting into our buildings has more and more importance to people today, which sort of all of this leads us up to the uncomfortable truth that I was kind of building to. And here in Canada, the government has outlawed the use of single-use PVC shopping bags. Up until by the end of 2023, that they're not going to be available, period, anymore. Up until that point, there's a surcharge on every sale that includes a disposable bag because of the harm that's been found in and the amount of waste generated and the fact that it will only start to break down in 500 years, if ever. And it's something that we're understanding in a bunch of different industries, but it's not something that we've really taken to heart here in the building industry. Um, all of those acronyms basically add up to a vinyl-based product, and it's the fastest growing category in cladding for architectural developments and has been for years now. More importantly, the forecast, if you look at any kind of market forecast projection for this industry globally, as well as here in the US, the projections are growth that outstrips that of even the high inflation rates that we're seeing right now. So the growth is even going to exceed inflation between 5 and 9% by 2026. And the market itself is worth around 30 billion US today. Now we're finding that, or we're realizing that this product, polyvinyl chloride, is something that is one of the most caustic things that we've created as a species, because it causes problems during manufacturing throughout its lifespan for both the occupants and workers in a space, and there's literally no way for us to deal with it. If it's incinerated, it actually makes its problems compounded and worse, and it's not stable enough to be recycled in any meaningful sense. And yet it's something that is growing and growing each and every year, even though it causes, it's carcinogenic, it causes central nervous system damage and massive liver and kidney problems. The truth is that we have to kind of reconcile ourselves with the fact that we're choosing to lease our buildings, and it's our future generations, it's our grandkids and our great grandkids that are going to have to reconcile themselves and pay the true premiums when they come due. So I really wanted to bring that message today, that the next time you have a client sitting in front of you, whether you're a salesperson, a manufacturer, or a design professional, and they're asking you for a lower monetary cost solution that will allow them to achieve their design goals, try highlighting the fact that they're consciously making the choice that someone else, someone else is going to pay the costs of that realization, that a low upfront cost is always a false economy. There's always someone that pays. So now this phrase, I really wrestled with putting it in or not, and I chose to because even though it's generally used in kind of a insulting way, the fact that this phrase exists is a sign that the reins of trends and policy are starting to change hands to younger generations. And why that becomes important is the demographic between 30 and 40 years old right now makes up over 40% of the consumer base, both in housing and building and literally everything. And in a study that Deloitte made on corporate policy, 40% of that demographic said that business should not be primarily driven by a healthy bottom line, but by how that business can contribute to society. And companies are really waking up and making some shifts towards more benevolent and transparent practices. And there's some really positive things that are coming out of this. The Science-Based Target Initiative is something that was created in the early 20-aughts, and as of 2020, they signed on their 1,000th member. And this is something that's really, really important because claims without backup are anathema to the Science Based Target Initiative. And their membership accounts for over $10 trillion of combined market value today. Net zero is another thing that we hear a lot from both municipal governments, federal governments, and state governments, as well as private companies as well. Up to about, actually, it's more than 1/3 of the world's largest publicly traded companies today have committed to net zero targets by 2050 now. One of the things, if you look deeper into their net zero statements and how they plan on achieving them by 2050, a lot of the heavy lifting right now, currently, and for years to come, is being done by carbon offsets. Now, I put Mr. Oliver there with his show Last Week Tonight, and whether you agree with his political bent or not, because he definitely has one, that 30-minute show on carbon offsets at least sort of sets the stage and gives you a jumping off point to do more research into what carbon offsets are doing, both on a government and private company level, where they're putting their money into, and what they're saying is they're getting the offsets from, is incredibly important. Because if you're going to throw money at a situation, it better be doing as much good as it possibly can, if that's giving you your benchmark of sustainability for your strategy. It is a large piece of the puzzle for a lot of companies' net zero statements and policy planning. And a lot of this sort of market is unverified, and it's very tough to find a lot of information on where that money's going and what it's actually doing, because a lot of them wind up sponsoring forests and stopping forests from being cut down that in a lot of cases weren't in danger of being cut down. A lot of the time it's agricultural land reserve or protected areas already. Looking at innovative solutions, like I just gave one example here. There's countless others, but this is one of the most highly visible. This gentleman's Chris Sacca. He made most of his money in angel investing, and he's sunk almost all of his personal fortune into a new company called Lower Carbon Capital that funds as an incubator startups that have a mission statement in Sacca's own way. Basically, the mission statement of Lower Carbon is finding and funding and supporting businesses that are driven to F the planet. And so if you're going to put money, if you're working for a company, or better yet, own a company, and you're going to put money towards a sustainable initiative to offset the harm that you're doing until you can find better ways to do less harm, then looking for innovative solutions that are actually doing the most good and leveraging your capital for your offsets as much as possible is one of the most important things you can do. So, stepping off my soapbox now, and all of this is kind of building to trends, and I think this also underlies the message of why ceramics really are and should be at the forefront of this sort of global shift and universal shift across all of our design industries to a more benevolent approach. Because the way ceramics, because of their lifespan and because of the way it's made up, assimilates and interprets trends and then brings them to the market is unique because of its lifespan and how long our clients invest in our products for and what kind of service they offer to our clients. I've talked about this quite a few times in my trend presentations, that there's a couple of different ways that companies can interpret trends. And one of the easiest sort of illustrations of this point is color forecasting. It's something that we're all familiar with in this industry, from Pantone's Color of the Year to all of the wonderful research that goes into the color forecast by paint companies, excuse me, fabric companies, and all sorts of other different design um, oriented industries. It's something that comes out every single year. And when you think about how often ceramics are used, we're sort of looking very differently than, say, a paint company would at color. What we're looking for is the vertices and the intersections that happen over a decade or more, and what's going on in trends, where trends may be a staccato, almost like echocardiogram look. If you're looking at the annual trends, ceramics are more a wave that takes info from multiple years. And we're looking for ways to complement the more transient trends that happen annually. So what we do is we look at everything that's happening over a span of years, and then use color space. And this is something, even when we live and breathe it every day, we often forget that color space is not only subjective, but it's also three-dimensional, and it's huge. When you're looking at colors, there's a bunch of tools now. Like I gave one example, color.adobe.com is one that I use quite a bit. There's tons of other ones. And one of the most interesting things to do, and it's something that I did in product development quite a bit, is sort of start plotting colors from major paint brands, colors from Color of the Year, and it starts to build a story of what's happening in terms of color. And it's something that the ceramic industry has to be very, very good at, because our product's going to be there for 2 or 3 iterations of many other products, from paint to fabrics to furniture to all kinds of things. So the more timeless we can get, the broader we can stretch our horizons in terms of color research, the better off we are in terms of developing something that lasts as long as ceramic tile does. So when it comes to trends, I think that the story that's emerged over the past couple of years really kind of underscores and italicizes this this message and this shift that we're seeing to a more benevolent design process. Because what we're seeing driving product development, and this goes right the way through everything that's used in an interior or exterior of our built environment, we're seeing these trends translate to almost every field, but they're definitely driving ceramics. And these sort of 4 key trends are something that the industry has been focused on, and all of our technology and creating new capabilities are giving us ways to embody these trends in such an incredible way. And I'm going to go through each of them in detail, because they sort of build more on that story of integrity and transparency, and a more benevolent thought process in terms of our environment. So biophilia is one that we saw become huge in during lockdown times, and it's because of the undeniable attraction that humans have to the natural world, its forms, its colors, its textures and structures. And it's something that we see, literally in color done quite a bit in ceramics. In our middle frame there, we've got something where a biophilic design is superimposed on top of another material, and that decoration is being done in different structures, both in texture and in finish, that we can also apply digitally in a much more subtle way. And the other way to apply a biophilic design process, as we'll see in a future trend, just creating a beautiful, harmonious canvas that allows raw, natural vegetation to be incorporated into the design, like this outdoor space here. And that's something that we're seeing more and more across multiple different industries. Agnosticism is another word that I've used to describe ceramics and the trends in ceramics a lot over the past couple of years. And I've used it in context of contingency agnosticism, where choosing products that don't care how hybridized our lifestyle is, how varied the use cases that we're going to apply to a space are, and material agnosticism, that we can choose to specify one material and have it be authentic and realistic, visually, tactilely, and everything, with only one performance characteristic, is incredibly powerful for today's consumer. And we see, in all of these spaces, multiple layers of these trends coming up, and being able to digitally reproduce something like we saw right back at the beginning, the beautiful faience glaze of that ancient Egyptian ceramic, being able to reproduce not just the look, but the structure, the texture, the metallic flex, and do all of that digitally today, means that ceramics are one of the most powerful skeleton keys that you can have in your arsenal for creating a modern design language. So authenticity and raw, natural, unembellished character is something that everyone's looking for today. And it's something that's moving into our design language more and more. It's something that people are craving in their daily lives. So they're creating spaces that have that characteristic as well. And as I said, like being able to recreate an authentic anything that is raw and unembellished and creates a feeling of comfort and invitingness is incredibly important. This is one thing that I come across every time I'm looking at a critic, especially a well-respected critic, talking about a well-respected master in their field, any creative field. What we tend to celebrate the most is when someone is accomplished enough that they can take out as much as possible to keep just the kernel of their completed thought there. That's something that's incredibly hard to do, whether it's in writing or in art or in architecture and design. And it's something that we've been really focused on in ceramic development today, being able to manipulate finish and add just the details that make something authentic is something that's highly achievable today. And the last one is a Scandinavian term called hygge. And it's sort of a feeling of invitingness and comfort. And it's embodied by multiple layers of slight variations in color and texture to create an enveloping, warm, enveloping and comfortable feel in an environment today. It's a multi-sensory engagement that respects and really kind of takes care of humanity, because it's a deeply human thing to crave comfort. And when we look at designers that have been celebrated, around the world, it's simplicity and attention to the human form that's really made a huge impact on people. Steve Jobs and the rounded rectangle I've brought up a few times. One of his inspirations, Dieter Rams, and the design of Braun and the simplicity and the tactile approach is something that with all of the capabilities that we have and all of the history that we have in this product, um, embodying this kind of layered comfort or hygge trend is something that ceramics are uniquely suited to do. So I hope I've left you with an idea that design kind of should equal benevolence. Design is at its best, the definition is seeing a solution and having the creativity, or sorry, seeing a problem and having the creativity to come up with a solution that makes that problem better for both humanity and for the planet. Because we have to understand and internalize the fact that our creations have consequences beyond us and their useful lifespan. So seeking out things that offer solutions for generations is one of the most benevolent and important things we can do today. So I hope I've given you some food for thought. I hope I've given you some ideas of how ceramics are building and understanding trends, and we'll be sort of developing trends as we move into 2023 and beyond. Thank you everyone for showing up today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I know it's a busy time of year, and I hope it was worth your hour. Much appreciated, everyone. On behalf of Tile of Spain, thank you and happy holidays.